came a long way from St. Louis. You climbed the ladder of success. I've seen the flashy foreign cars that were parked out in front of your fancy address. You came a long way from St. Louis. You broke a lot of hearts between.
And welcome back to the Radioactive Take with me, Bryan Styble, longtime commercial news talk radio guy, trying the YouTube thing these days, and so flattered to find you on the other side of the camera here, and we'll try to offer some things worth paying attention to as we work our way to the end of this rundown. And it's a short one. This is not going to be a replay of the extra innings game we played yesterday, 17, 18 innings before we were done, to use the baseball extended metaphor. And yeah, it was an extended edition of the Radioactive Take. But this one will be, I don't know if anything I do or say is succinct, but we're not in this one for the long haul, as we bask under the moonlight of a super blue moon. We'll be talking a lot about that in just a few moments. But Florida flooding in the wake of Idalia. Hope those waters recede soon. Good luck to those folks up there, over there actually. And a scary moment there. Did you see it for Mitch McConnell? Froze on camera. I freeze on camera with some frequency, but it's due to just forgetting what the heck I'm talking about. But he really lost it for a few moments. It was more than a few moments, something like 30 seconds. And we wish only good health to him. I'm a big fan of his. And I've spent some time in the capital of Kentucky, Frankfort. We will talk to you about that at some point here on the Radioactive Take, because it's very interesting. It's the only time in American history a governor has been assassinated. Happened in Frankfurt. I'll tell you the story. You could look it up, the story yourself. It's well documented. But that's not what we're here to tell you about. Did want to mention as well, Alice Cooper. He's lost an endorsement deal from a cosmetics company. Well, he wore a lot of makeup on stage, Alice Cooper did. And he lost the deals because of some comments he made about the transgender thing. And we wish nothing but good thoughts to him as well. Big fan, not of his stage work, but I'm a fan of his golf game. He's a serious golfer. I think they probably know him as Vince. Real name Vincent Fournier, I believe. On the golf course, I think they call him Vince. But he's very good at that, and he's very good at a lot of things. And sorry to see him in the middle of it's not really a scandal, but it made the papers, so it's making the Radioactive Take. But that's what other people are talking about. I want to talk, and I guess a lot of people have been talking today about the supermoon, the blue moon. Blue moon because it's the second full moon in this month of August in 2023. Here as we report on at the end of Wednesday, August 30th, 2023. It's very unusual to have a full moon coincide with a supermoon. Very unusual. And I think the next time it happens we'll have a blue moon. Those happen every couple of years, but there won't be another double or super and blue moon. There won't be another of those, we're told. I think in 2037, I think was the year I heard, something like that, down the road. We'll see if we get anywhere near that. I'll see. You're probably a lot younger than the old radioactive guy. So you'll probably almost certainly, unless you get hit by a meteorite, always a possibility, not a strong one, but you'll probably live to see that. Me, I'm not so optimistic, although I am trying to reach the century mark in October of 2054. But before that, in the meantime, I got to talk to you about this blue moon, because, man, do I have a blue moon story for you. And what's incredible about it, I've been told this is the best story I've ever told. And it's one of these only in L.A. things. If I hadn't moved to Hollywood, this would have never happened in Boise, Idaho. And you notice I didn't say Boise. I learned when I was in Boise, state capital of Idaho. I learned that it's Boise, the way the locals pronounce it. I got a couple of stories about Boise to tell you, but no airtime to do so on this edition of the Radioactive Take. Email, by the way, comes to radioactiveseattle@gmail.com. And we're getting some now. Some pretty interesting stuff. Don't know if I'm going to be able to even tangentially cover it. And tangents are going to come up in a moment here. The email, I can't. Thank you to a bunch of different people from various places that are sending us tidings to or at radioactiveseattle@gmail.com. But no time for that. Again, no extra innings on this one. In fact, we're not even going to go 9 innings on this metaphorical baseball game, I'm trying to say, and maybe I shouldn't even be trying to say that, because we got important stuff to cover here. So the blue moon thing, let's get to it. Second full moon of a month, and by the way, it didn't happen, or excuse me, it a lot of people think it happens all day. That's the way the calendars portray it. You got the square representing, the 30th of August, 2023, Wednesday. There'll be a little, in a corner on your calendar cell there, you'll see a full circle indicating that's when the full moon hits. And everybody says, well, the whole day, or at least the whole night. And I'm here to tell you that's not true. It's just for a moment. It's not even for a minute, although the best I can give you is it happened tangentially. It happened at 4:36 p.m. Excuse me, sometime during that minute. Didn't even last a second. It's instant, and that's where the tangent comes in. A little basic geometry. 9th grade for me, 10th or 11th for you maybe, or maybe never. If so, you may not even understand what I'm talking about with the word tangent in this context, but it applies. But sometime during that minute of 4:36 p.m. Eastern is when the full moon occurred. It had happened, and then it started waning. It waxed, and then it waned, and it only was full for an instant, not a full day as the calendars imply. But it is a blue moon, and if you look up, and you can, and I did, and you probably should as well, because there were so many facts they were throwing at me about blue moons. I thought it was pretty simple. I thought it was just second full moon in a given month, and that is how it has colloquially been known, or come to be thought of. But that's not the technical thing. In fact, there's not even a technical definition that astronomers have for it, because the whole blue moon thing started with astrology. And while we do cover A to Z on the Radioactive Take, Aristotle to Zoroaster, for instance. You thought I was going to say Zimmerman, but I didn't. We do the A to Z thing here at WBQS, but 1A we don't do is astrology. And I got friends that are into it. I got a buddy that's making money doing it in LA, and he's more than a buddy. I've known this guy for 40 years. And how you doing out there, Matt? And because astrology's a big thing, we'll leave it to other people to discuss it. We're not going to bring it up ever again. But astronomy all the time, including on the Blue Moon edition of the Radioactive Take. Now, here's the thing. Again, most people just think second full moon in a given month, and it only happens every couple of years. That's your blue moon, and it is. But it's also a fantastic song. It's more than a song. It's a standard. Rodgers and Hart wrote it. for some play, I guess, some Broadway musical or something in the 1930s, I guess. Tin Pan Alley kind of a thing, except I don't think Rodgers and Hart ever had to work in the Brill Building, where so many of the Tin Pan Alley songwriters were toiling, including Carole King and her husband at the time, Jerry Goffin. King and Goffin. Pleasant Valley Sunday. Did you know they wrote that for the Monkees? Well, I don't know if they wrote it for the Monkees, but the Monkees ended up having a huge hit with it, and why not? It was a fantastic song, still is. But anyway, Rodgers and Hart wrote Blue Moon, and all kinds of people have recorded it. But there's one hit that everybody remembers. It was a doo-wop thing by the Marcells. That was not just a number one on Billboard. I think it was number one for a bunch of weeks, 1961, early 61. And, but again, that's just, and that was a doo-wop and kind of rock and roll, not kind of, it was rock and roll, but also doo-wop, because it was a vocal band. The Marcells was a vocal band. I don't know that they played instruments. And I don't know much about their history, but I know one remarkable thing about them, and we're getting to that here on the Radioactive Take with me, Bryan Styble, WBQS News Talk Radio, your source for all kinds of wacky ideas. But factuality we maintain, or at least try to. If not, lay into us at radioactiveseattle@gmail.com. So this Blue Moon song, Blue Moon tune, is a standard. At least dozens, I would think hundreds of people by this point have recorded it. We're recording artists, and garage bands have been playing it forever and will continue to. It'll brighten that future. But it's hardly just the Marcells song. And although they added a lot of energy to it, and you might say, well, boy, at least we're talking doo-wop here. I was afraid he was going to talk about that Dylan guy again, the guy with the funny nose, the funnier hair, and the funniest voice. He just can't sing, and at least we're talking doo-wop, so there's no Dylan in this segment. You were thinking, but it so happens Dylan also recorded Blue Moon. Ended up on an album called Self-Portrait, which is a serious misnomer. Self-Portrait is not the kind of thing you'd want to be introduced to Dylan with. It was an easy listening album. And one of the tunes, the opening tune, All the Tired Horses, didn't even have Dylan's vocal on it. And infamously, Greil Marcus, not just darling of Rolling Stone for years, wrote for him, interviewed for him many times. He reviewed Self-Portrait for, I think it was Rolling Stone, and it opened up with the line, well, we use polite language here on the Radioactive Take, so I'll just tell you what Greil Marcus, his opening line review of Self-Portrait, Dylan's easy listening album. From 1970, it was released. The recordings were done in New York and Nashville in 69 and 70. And what did he say? What did Greil Marcus say? The first line of his thing is, "What is this stuff?" Only the S word he used was not stuff. "What is this stuff?" Greil Marcus exclaimed in Rolling Stone. And I happen to agree with that assessment because it's not representative of Dylan's art at all. But he did do Blue Moon. And he was doing it in this crooning thing when he was, the Nashville Skyline thing. You know the song Lay Lady Lay? I don't like it at all. I can play it on guitar. It's pretty simple, but I don't like the song. And I don't like Dylan doing it, but he did it. And he crooned it. And he was also crooning Blue Moon on Self-Portrait. And, Blue Moon, you left me standing. It sounds like that, only on key. And I happen to like it. I listen to it. I don't like Dylan perverting, that's too strong a word, refracting, let's put it that way. I don't like him refracting his sound that much. The beauty of Dylan's talent, and there's a lot of them, but the beauty of it, most principally, is how many different realms, how many different genres he can handle effectively as a singer-songwriter, musician. And this was a fine example of how far afield he can get from the old Johnny's in the basement mixing up the medicine, I think Subterranean Homesick Blues. So that's the Dylan I'm listening to. Now, why am I listening to it? Well, because I like it. But what's the circumstance in which I was listening to it? And this is strange, but this is exactly how it happened. Taking you out to Mar Vista, California. I lived there for 6 years, but in 2 different places. And this involves both places. I'd listened to this Blue Moon off of Self-Portrait. I've listened to this song, that recording, not just this song. I think he actually recorded it twice, and I've heard the other one a couple of times. This one I listen to all the time, though, or at least frequently. As many times as I've watched Gone with the Wind, which, believe it or not, is about 3 dozen times. I know that sounds like an exaggeration. Styble's always making with the hyperbole. Not in the case of Gone with the Wind. Gone with the Wind I've seen about 3 dozen times. And I've probably listened to this song, this track of Blue Moon, at least 2 dozen times over the years. And in Mar Vista, which is a little neighborhood in West Los Angeles, and it's hardly the fanciest one. There's fancier burgs just to the north, neighborhoods just to the north, not to the south, but just to the north and to the west, of course, because the west is the ocean, and the ocean's only a mile basically from the western border of Mar Vista, and we're just on the other side of Venice. Venice on the beach, of course. Muscle Beach, Arnold Schwarzenegger, all that. That's there in Venice. And I lived in Venice as well, but right before I left L.A. to do commercial news talk radio, like on WBQS. And then there's Mar Vista. So there's the ocean and about a mile's worth of, maybe a mile and a half of Venice, and then Mar Vista. And that's where I lived, in 2 different places. And when I lived in the first place, listening, for instance, perhaps to this take of Blue Moon, it was no problem because there was fine ventilation. We had windows on both sides. It was a big place in Mar Vista. But then I moved. And the place I moved to was a studio apartment. And I don't mind studio apartments. I don't mind them at all. In fact, that's why I took it. I liked it. But I wanted to get out of that big place. And I didn't have roommates anymore, so that was the idea. It was just like the YouTube thing, a one-man band. I was a one-man apartment. Just down the street, still in Mar Vista. Not far. I mean, about 4. I measured it on Google Earth, Google Maps. I measured it. It was about 4,000 yards from where Anne Heche died in that horrific fiery crash. Real close. That's Mar Vista. That put Mar Vista on the map infamously. But this incident, I'd like to think, will put it on the map, at least in a quaint sort of a way. So I'm in the new place, but it has no ventilation. It had 1 window, and that was it. And so you don't get any airflow at all. So, and I'm also in L.A., so I'm not going to leave my door unlocked. And that would work. Just opening the door, leaving it ajar to the hallway would allow enough airflow. I didn't have to have another open window down the hall or something. So that's what I did. Had it set up that way. And since it's L.A., I made sure that it was still secure. I had the chain. I extended the chain on the door so that somebody walking by, just anybody, couldn't just burst in on me. They'd at least have to break the chain. And that never happened. It was a safe building. Never had any problems. Had a guy die out front. And we'll tell you about that. It's the only time in my life I've ever actually seen a human being die while I was watching. And it happened right up in front of this building. But that's the closest thing to bad neighborhood I was in. It's a beautiful neighborhood. It's upscale West Los Angeles, and that's serious money, even back in the late 80s when I was there. And that's when this happened. I was only in this second place in Mar Vista for about maybe a year before I went back to Hollywood for my second tenure in Hollywood. Lived in Hollywood twice. When I say Hollywood, I mean right in the precinct, the district of Los Angeles that is within what is called Hollywood. But 2 times in Mar Vista as well. And this is key, because if I wouldn't have been in this other place, none of this would have ever happened. Wouldn't be talking to you about Lorenzo. Was it Lorenzo Hart? I don't know. The other, Hart's partner, Hart, and I can't even remember who did the song, but we're talking about Dylan's version here. Hart and Rodgers, that's what it is. I think it was Lorenzo Hart. Anyway, if not for this airflow problem, this wouldn't have happened. But I got the door ajar with the chain, and I was a writer in those days. Still am, but I was a published writer in those days, writing nonfiction book reviews for the Los Angeles Herald Examiner, and that was a great gig. Met some important people through that, and got some great journalism published. Science and history, music is what I was writing about for the most part. And so I'm probably working on one of those pieces at my computer there. And I'm playing this tune, Blue Moon, off of Self-Portrait. Dylan's crooning it. And, I mean, let's not devalue the word croon, because this is a crooner. This is the crooner. You can't even Sinatra, and Sinatra's one of the 2 or 3 greatest voices in American musical history. Even Sinatra wasn't as good a crooner. That crooning is a very specific kind of singing, and this is the king. Bing. So this take of Dylan's of Blue Moon is not to be compared with Bing Crosby probably did Blue Moon too. Rodgers and Hart, that's who wrote it. We know that. And I know that I'm enjoying it every time I hear Dylan doing it. And while I'm playing it, and since the door is widely ajar, it's going out into the hallway. And there's this fellow, not just a fellow, he was the handyman. Never worked on my apartment, so I didn't know him. I just knew him as Richard. And I saw him 2 or 3 times before this incident, and never thought much about it. He seemed like a quiet guy. And I can't even say that. I didn't talk to him enough to get an impression whether he was quiet or loudmouthed like me. So I didn't know him other than as Richard the handyman. If something breaks, he'll fix it, but nothing broke. So, and it's a good thing the stereo didn't break, because that wouldn't, he probably, 1, couldn't have fixed it. I don't do that. I do plumbing and stuff like that, not your stereo. And 2, then I wouldn't have been playing the record. But I am playing the record. And it was probably a tape, but it's Blue Moon. Dylan's crooning it. And he happens to be walking by. And he pops his head in, or he couldn't get very far in. It was only about this far ajar, but I could hear him very clearly. He says, "Hey, I'm on that record." I said, "You recorded with Dylan?" He goes, No, I was on the original. I said, "What do you mean original?" He goes, "Well, on the radio." I said, "You're talking about Blue Moon by the Marcells? You were in the Marcells?" He says, "Yeah." Okay. And then he walked off. I didn't even get it. I was going to the door and going to dislodge the chain thing, and I wanted to find all about it. He's sitting in on one of the most famous, one of the most celebrated, one of the most listened to hits in Billboard history. It wasn't just a big tune. It had that business at the beginning, which actually dated to another doo-wop song that they used to have in their repertoire, the way Wikipedia described it. But oh, by the way, he never even told me his name. I learned his name soon enough. It's Richard Naus, and I don't know if he's still alive. I hope he is. Hope he's still singing. And what a night to be doing it tonight with the blue moon. Hope he's still with some reconstituted version of the Marcells. But he was there that afternoon back in, I believe this was 87 that this happened. And, well, let's face it. I'm a pretty naive guy, and I'm certainly not a cynical guy. I know cynics. I have a couple of friends who are incredible cynics, and I'm not talking about stand-up comedians. Just about every stand-up comedian's a cynic. I'm talking about just people in general life I know that are very, very cynical, much more so than little old me. And so I can easily be bamboozled. Almost fell for that deep fake of Obama that we talked about, I think, just yesterday here on the Radioactive Take. Darn near fell for that. So I didn't want to, even back in 87, when I was more naive than I am today, and I'm still pretty darned naive, I wanted to check on this. So I went to the one place, in those days, no internet. So I went to a bookstore, and yeah, we had bookstores back in the 20th century. Young folks may not know that here, but I'm here to tell you over WBQS radio that bookstores, especially used bookstores, were fabulous places. And there was this place that had one of these encyclopedias of rock. It wasn't Lillian Roxon's Encyclopedia of Rock. I know that book, different book. And it was a book that I figured would have a photograph of him because I wanted to see if this guy was just making this up. And I went there and looked it up. M's, Marcells. And it wasn't a big, it wasn't 1/5 the size of the write-up in Wikipedia, but it was in there, and there was a photograph. And sure enough, my handyman, Richard, is Richard Naus, Knauss, I believe. So that's my Blue Moon story. And I wish I could tell you that it was just something fanciful I wrote as a creative story. Maybe back in Ms. Slivka's creative writing class. I took it in 6th grade with a darling friend of mine, I think I can call her. I hope I can. I was looking at her back in 1966, the fall, in that creative writing class. Sandy, hello. I think she's in the audience. I hope she is. I certainly hope you'll be tomorrow when we reconvene this little narrow cast we call the Radioactive Take. But anyway, this was not just a fanciful story. I'm not smart enough to write something like this. This really happened, and it really happened just like I told you. And it's a real good reason to find that take of Blue Moon that Dylan did in, I believe that one's from New York, not Nashville. But I might be wrong about that. It's one or the other. It wasn't recorded in Bakersfield, although he's played Bakersfield. And I toured the building. He was performing there in 1964. But another digression, and there's just no more airtime for that. So I'll remind you that we all hope the waters ebb soon in the flood zone left from the hurricane here in the Sunshine State. And speaking of Florida, we offer you a left-handed salute therefrom. See you tomorrow.